This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 351, Core Theming. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we're talking about core theming with Cristina Chumillas. Cristina is a front-end developer and designer working at Lullabot. She's a Drupal core provisional front-end framework manager and UX maintainer. She's also maintainer of the new admin theme, Claro, which I'm sure we'll hear more about a little bit later. Cristina, welcome back to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Hi again, and thank you for having me again here.
I'm John Picozzi, and today my co-hosts are joining us for his last show here, Mike Herschel. Mike, yeah, you made it through, right? Mike is a senior front-end dev at AVB Digital, which works with large federal websites. Mike is also the lead dev for the Olivero theme, again, something we're probably going to talk a lot about today, which is now, well, in June, which we are in, the default theme for Drupal core. Mike, thanks for joining us, and we are glad you made it through all four of your appearances here.
It's been very grueling.
Don't scare anybody else off. Also joining us is Nick Laughlin. Nick, how are you doing?
Doing well. Glad to be here. Looking forward to learning all the new stuff in Drupal core.
There we go. That's what we're all about. Before we jump into our module of the week, let's hear from our friends at Drupal Camp Asheville. Thank you, Drupal Camp Asheville, for telling us about your camp. I hear it's great. I've never been, but if you have the ability and the time, you should definitely check it out.
I will be there.
There you go. You can hang out with Mike Herschel while you are down.
That's going to scare people away.
I mean, listen, it's a 50-50, right?
Yep.
Let's jump into our module of the week, which, Mike, I think you know intimately, if I am not mistaken. Tell us a little bit about Quicklink.
All right. So Quicklink, the Quicklink module integrates in the Quicklink JavaScript library. And so the Quicklink JavaScript library is this like tiny little bit of JavaScript that's developed by the Google Chrome Labs team. And it does a bunch of cool stuff. Like what it does is it will look at all of the hyperlinks on your page, and it'll do what's called like a preload. So it'll kind of scan the page, and it'll tell the browser to, when it gets the chance, pull those down and cache them. So what that means is when you click on those hyperlinks, it's kind of an instantaneous page load because those pages are cached. So it has a whole bunch of really cool options in there. Like you can tell this library to like ignore certain pages. You could say ignore URLs that have a certain type of pattern to them, or ignore URLs that have a class. So you could do all types of cool stuff. So the module basically provides a UI for all those options, and it also provides like a debug interface where you can check a little box that says debug this, and it'll throw on like a bunch of little icons to say you're pulling this one down, you're not pulling this one down, and I'll put some stuff into the browser console. And it's just like super cool. I kind of put it on all the sites that I've worked on, and it makes things very quicker and happier for the end user. I'm a big kind of front end performance geek, and this kind of makes things quicker. And it's been around for maybe about 2.5, 3 years. It's I got like almost full test coverage on it. It's pretty reliable. It supports Drupal 8, 9, and it'll support Drupal 10 when Drupal 10 is coming out. And yeah, has about like over 2,000 installs.
Mike, is it loading any link on a page, or is it just the same domain links on a page? So like if I had a link to Nick's website, would it background load Nick's website as well?
That's a great question. So it has a lot of sensible defaults. So by default, it will only load stuff on the same domain, and also only loads when you're not authenticated. There's a checkbox to load while you're authenticated if you want to. It won't load if you have a session, like let's say you're using Drupal Commerce and there's like some session, it won't load because that can kind of hurt some performance, or like, you know, peg the origin, where the origin server or something like that. So those are all configurable options. If you do, it will not load the log out link. So say like if you have it configured to load while you're logged in, it's not going to load the log out link, because that would be funny.
I'm sure you hit that. I'm sure you had to find that.
Yeah, has a whole bunch of like really interesting things in there. You can add on query parameters, like query string parameters, to disable it too, or things like that. So yeah.
I mean, is there a possibility that it could like clear cache if you have it working as an admin when you're logged in? Like, is it going through the admin menu and loading all of those pages when you're?
So if you have it loaded as an admin, that's a good question. I'm not really quite sure. I believe the clear cache is an actual, the button that says clear cache is an actual like input type submit. So it's not gonna, it's only gonna pull down like the hyperlinks. But that being said, I believe within the latest version there is a limit. I don't know what the limit is by default, but it will limit it to like a certain amount of items, and it also only loads stuff that's currently in the viewport. So like let's say you have like a whole bunch of links, it's not going to load those until you scroll down and they show up in the viewport.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, that sounds cool, and that sounds like it probably helps with site viewing and performance quite a bit.
Yeah, it really does, and we use it on a lot of sites. You know, like as you know, I used to work for Lullabot. We use it on lullabot.com. We use it on tons of cool stuff. So yeah.
Once you left, they probably removed it.
I would if I were them.
Yeah.
I would do a git log of all the stuff that I committed, immediate revert.
Ooh. Moving right along, let's move on to our primary topic. And, Christina, I'm going to ask you the huge question. What's new in core theming?
Well, probably I would say both Claro and Olivero are the main two things. If you want to do front end in core, that's where you're going to land helping out. So both the two themes are the ones. Right now, if you are going to talk about what's new right now, that's it. What is coming next? Maybe that's another question. Yeah. What do you want to say, Mike?
So we can get to that, like what's coming, what's in the pipeline. But I agree. Like what's new, we have two new default themes. So Drupal 9.4 is coming out, I think, next week. So maybe by the shortly to when this podcast is released, when you install Drupal, holy crap, it's the stuff that we worked on. Like that is so cool. I can see Christina smiling, and I am too, and I'm just kind of really happy with that.
Yeah, few years going into there, few years contributing to both of them.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, it's a huge. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment. The last, of course, Bartik was updated when we went from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, but it essentially looked very similar. to kind of an end user. So this is kind of the first time in more than 10 years that
Ages.
the user interface is going to just completely change out for new users in Drupal. So can you tell us, Cristina, what's so important about the Claro theme getting into core? What are the biggest improvements that are coming with that? Because Claro is on the admin side, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically for the admin UI, and so I would say the biggest improvement is the UI itself, the look and feel. Because I'm not sure if you know, basically Claro, when we started off Claro, we just cloned 7 because we said, okay, we want a thing that is stable, that it has new styles and new colors and new UI, but we want to do it fast. And fast meant several years, but basically the background it's similar. So I would say basically the look and feel. And obviously over the years we've improved several things, but that I would say that's the main thing.
So Mike, we kind of have didn't want you asking yourself this question. So
Mike, why is Olivero in core important? That's a great question, Mike. So, like it's honestly like really similar to what Cristina said. Like Bartik was created when Internet Explorer 8 was still the dominant browser. Like think about that. Like that's a long time in internet years, and honestly, it's a testament to the fact that Bartik lasted this long. Like it was an excellent theme. It was developed by Jen Simmons back in like 2010, 2011, and but nothing lasts that long, like at least on the internet, and you can look at it, so Drupal has this perception issue, and when you install Drupal, like I've talked to so many people, and they say, oh yeah, I checked out Drupal, 10 years ago, and I there was a couple things I didn't like, yada yada yada, and then if they check it out again, it looks exactly the same. That's not cool. And in the meantime, Drupal has had all these improvements. It basically had its foundation ripped out from under it and like rebuilt, with the whole symphony situation. So like we wanted something that had like a modern look and feel, but at the same time we couldn't have it too modern, because if you make it too modern, it's gonna like kind of like almost fall out of fashion too early, so there was that fine line that you have to kind of navigate,
Well,
so go ahead.
I'd like to dig into something you said there a little bit. And design aside, like I think both themes look really great. And admittedly, on my personal website, I use the Gin admin theme, which uses Claro kind of like under the hood to do a lot of what it does, right? But I guess you touched on the fact that like the admin themes hadn't been kind of like touched or like hadn't been changed in like both front end and back end themes for like over 10 years. I'm wondering why you think it took so long before we were able to get to this point. And then I'm going to ask a second part to that question, but I'll let you answer the first part first.
You want to get to that first, Cristina? Because I have thoughts.
Oh, okay. So the first goes to me. Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess that's how open source is, especially Drupal with so many people with so many opinions. You open an issue and you never know if that issue is going to be solved like in 2 weeks or 2 years or 8 years. And every time you open something that it's not, it doesn't have like a clear goal, and it's a small thing, it can just go crazy and not get finished. It's just what I was saying with Claro, for example. We said, okay, let's just clone 7 and apply the new styles. But it scaled and scaled and scaled, and it took years to actually just refresh 7. because actually it wasn't a refresh, because now that we're here, let's improve this and let's improve the other, and things just scale and scale, and it's open source. There's always someone that is going to come and say, let's do this improvement, or this is not passing accessibility, or this is going to whatever. And on the way, we actually improved a lot of things, but at the same time, it just took a long time.
Yeah. So from my point of view, it also comes down to priorities. You know, like Drupal has always been a developer-centric content management system, and like the people that are in the power structures of Drupal, like, you know, I'm talking like Dries, you know, Gabor, Angie, and whoever else, like, at least from my perception of them, they're not like design type people. They're not marketing people. They're developers. So like when you're talking to someone like them, like what gets them excited? They're getting excited about that Symfony upgrade. You know, they're getting excited about that object-oriented, you know, PHP annotation stuff or whatever, you know. And so that comes down, and so Christina's kind of shaking her head here, but I'm gonna continue on a little bit. But Olivero was a pure community thing. You know, it started like the idea happened at in a hotel lobby at DrupalCon Seattle, and we just kind of had a discussion with, I think, like Angie, Larry Escala, and several others, along with, and then my coworker Pooch Bonacorsi was there, and you know, we said, is this happening? And they said, no, you should do it. And then eventually it happened, you know, but it wasn't like an official it wasn't like an official initiative until we were like kind of like pretty far into it, if that makes sense.
I think there's a couple of other factors too, in that many times, like you said, Drupal's target market, especially since 8, has been much larger, more enterprise companies and applications. And so there's usually a larger team associated with that. And so you usually have designers and front end developers, and, you know, you're building a custom theme for the front end. So I think, you know, your point is, if you install Drupal, yes, it looked the same, but when you look at, you know, the larger Drupal sites, they're all using custom homegrown sites anyway.
I would argue that's like a chicken and egg type thing. Is it that way because Bartek looked old, or is it, you know, like
yeah. Christina, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. So first, to what Mike said about the product managers, like both, I've been in so many UX meetings with Gabor and Angie. Actually, I think they kind of moved at some point a few years ago. The product managers meetings, they were on the UX meeting, and together with Roy, and the three of them were almost every week on the meeting talking about new features. So and Roy was also in there, so for a long time, and he's a designer. So and I've seen, I mean, last DrupalCon, Angie, when we were talking about new features like possible dashboard, a new menu for editors, I mean, she was getting really excited with that. So I don't think they are that developer focused.
Okay. So let me change the question, or ask the second question here, right? You know, so I heard from you guys that, you know, it took a long time because, you know, the open source community can sometimes take time to do these things. Priorities may not have necessarily been where they needed to be to make it happen. Nick raises a good point that, like, not a lot of people maybe were using the, you know, the core and themes in Drupal. So these are brand new. We'll say they're brand new in like 2021, 2022, right? How long do you think we're going to have these themes in core? Is it something where there have been conversations to say, like, hey, in 2 years, 3 years, we're going to drop these and bring in new ones? Or are we going to have like version 1, version 2, version 3, version 100?
I can talk about Claro, and I'm not sure if that conversation happened for Olivero. We actually decided that what we're going to do is just improve Claro instead of rebuilding a new thing every time. Basically, so Claro is based on the new Drupal design system, which at some point I hope we will publish like on a website. Right now it's just on Figma. And our idea is that if we want to change the look and feel, we're just going to start improving component by component. Instead of refreshing everything from scratch, we are just going to implement these changes.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, version 2, version 3, if that's a version thing, or if we are just maybe going to change things step by step.
Well, the truth is too, you have kind of different problems. Like I feel like with Claro or admin themes rather, a lot of what people are seeing day to day is forms, right? And so you can, if you focus there, and provide improvements there, like it's not like the front end where you change a class and it's going to break the entire site because somebody has some custom CSS. Depending on that, usually.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a main reason why we don't want like subtheming the admin thing, for example. I mean, they can customize a lot of things, but I mean, well, I'm not sure if actually Mike is doing his face. What do you want to add to
that? So like, all right. So the question is there going to be a new theme coming out? Or those discussions haven't happened. We're making some changes to Olivero for Drupal 10, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the show that I'm really excited about. I honestly would love it if we have a new front end theme in like 5 years or something, maybe for like Drupal 12. Like I think it's important. I don't want Olivero to stick around as long as Bartik has,
Yeah.
And it's important to kind of keep up that look and feel. And honestly, like it would be cool to have like a new team coming in to do something like that. And honestly, if anyone's listening to this and thinking, I think I could do that, I would love to kind of point you in the right direction. I think the hardest part, honestly, at least from my point of view, is design. You have to get a good design, and like a lot of the work, like a lot of the groundwork, could be from something like Olivero. Like you could easily kind of strip out, some of the Olivero styles, block placements and stuff, but keep things like it's an accessible menu and some of the accessibility features, and then kind of throw on a new fresh coat of paint. And that stuff like that would be possible,
Well, so we're looking at the Herschel theme in 2027.
I am not going to call it the Herschel theme. What would I call it? I don't know. Maybe the Pocosi theme.
Well, my question is this though. I guess if you look at this, so Drupal as a whole and larger kind of open source projects have this where I think especially the Drupal community, we find a problem, we solve it, we innovate, and then sometimes the development community at large goes that direction. Sometimes they don't, and then at some point, a few years down the road, there's a refactor. A good example is Drupal CI. So the Drupal community kind of built the Drupal CI system and testing system kind of from scratch. Well, now there's off-the-shelf products in the Drupal Association. A lot of their work recently has been towards moving to more off-the-shelf things. I think one of the issues that we've been talking about, though, is that front end moves just way faster than that. So I guess one of my questions is, have you solved that problem? And it sounds like, Christine, you have some thoughts on this. Have you found a way to like get some of those incremental front end improvements in over time without needing a full blown rebuild every 10 years, so that you can, without breaking people's sites, right? Have you thought about how to kind of get that incremental improvement into the core theming lifecycle?
We've discussed that. There's not a specific approach. We haven't gone that far on how to solve that yet because it involves too many things. But the thing is that, well, actually, one of the things that we've been discussing on a while, let me just go back a little bit to give some context here, is that the UI, the admin UI for Drupal is basically static.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any JavaScript in there, or basically we almost don't have any JavaScript. And ideally, at some point, that should change. I mean, if you are working with any modern admin UI, you will see that everything is JavaScript, everything is interactive. Pages are not loading the whole page all the time. So we need JavaScript there. How we are going to do that, I'm not sure, but that's going to involve loading parts of the UI per region or per feature or wherever. And that's going to be something that is going to happen. How, when, and who, I'm not sure yet. But that's definitely something that needs to happen at some point.
I want to expand on the question when you talk about like incremental improvements. So like one of the things that holds back Drupal from making a lot of incremental improvements is our commitment to backwards compatibility. We can't make changes knowing that we might break some sites out there because there's literally millions of websites, you know. So part of that involves the libraries API. So like y'all know, like in order to add like CSS or JavaScript to your website, you have to create a library, right? So when you create a library, when Drupal core creates a library, that's something that can be extended, which makes it very impossible or difficult to change the assets in that library because people might be relying on that, or there might be a contrib module that relies on that. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
So there's an issue, and I was looking for it, I didn't find it, but there's an issue to allow loading of assets directly from a template without creating a library. And to me, this is a big deal because if we allowed loading the CSS directly from the library and we allowed loading JavaScript direct from the library, there's no expectation of backwards compatibility at that point. And so like as a front-end developer, like one of the last things I want to do as a front-end developer is style Drupal's tabs. You know, but as a theme developer, if I'm creating a custom theme, I have to style Drupal's tabs, and I honestly think that's kind of dumb, you know. But the reason that we have that is precisely because we don't want to create a library that creates like a backwards compatibility issue. So when we're talking about incremental improvements, getting that issue into load the assets directly from the templates, that would allow us within Drupal core to have a CSS file that like does some default styling for tabs, that does like maybe add some default JavaScript for something or another, you know, and I think things like that would enable those incremental component by component improvements without having to worry about breaking backwards compatibility. So that's one of the things that I'm excited about.
Yeah, or even easily provide those styles from the admin theme because they show up on the front end theme, but they're admin components essentially. So if you could let Claro provide the tabs, and you just kind of define where they go, even though you're not on the admin theme, that'd be
and you could do that right now just by like extending Claro's libraries. But yeah.
So let's talk about, and we've talked about some of the improvements that have come from both the core admin theme as well as the front end theme. But I'm wondering for each of you, what's the single biggest improvement that you see in each theme from over the previous theme? So we'll let Cristina go first.
Probably, as I said, it could be, for me personally, it's the look and feel. It has changed a lot of things, but personally is how Drupal is perceived, or how Drupal looks like. I mean, and there's been a lot of improvements, that it's not just a look and feel, but overall for me it's a bigger one.
Cool. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, so like Olivero has a couple cool things. Like obviously the look and feel, like as in Cristina, like Cristina's answer, like that's paramount. But another thing that I just like about Olivero is just like we support second level navigation items. There's drop down menus in Olivero, and it works, and it's accessible. and like this feels like so 2010ish, but this is like out of the core, out of the box, it just works. And you know, it has this nice mobile menu, and like it just doesn't kind of shrink and wrap like Bartik does, and that's one thing that I'm really proud of. A lot of that navigation work, like if you look at the Olivero's default navigation, you think, oh, this is kind of basic. It works exactly the way I think it does. But a heck of a lot of work went into that. I've given some presentations, including a recent one at DrupalCon and in DrupalCon Portland, at talking about this. And like honestly, I could probably fill up 2 presentations with the amount of changes and stuff that we put in there, and thought process. And it's really interesting. And I learned a lot going through it too.
So now that we're putting some new themes in, I assume the plan is to retire some of the older themes, but what does that process look like? Is Bartik and 7 going away? Are they still maintained? Is there like a class, like we have the experimental classification for things that are coming into core? Do we have a deprecated section for things leaving core? What's the plan there?
You want to handle this, Cristina?
Yeah, sure. Basically, they're getting deprecated for Drupal 10. I mean, we are getting rid of them. There's some work still that needs to happen, like tests and several things. There's a bunch of issues. I think there's a meta issue to get rid of both 7 and Bartik. I'm not sure about Bartik. I'm sure about 7 because it's the one that I've been following. And basically, it's updating all the tests and everything that is related to that. And basically, we will get rid of them for 10, Drupal 10, and I think we are keeping them for at least Drupal 9 point whatever, because we are almost at Drupal 10. So they're probably going to stay there because we can't get rid of them because of backwards compatibility.
Yeah, and after anything gets moved out, it'll go into contrib. So like, let's say like you really, really like Bartik, or you really, really like 7, and you don't want to change it because Olivero stinks and so does Claro. Like you can still, pull it down and install it and all that type of stuff.
Is it called 7 because it was created for Drupal 7?
That's exactly why.
Am I literally just realizing this now, 10 years later?
I think you are.
Oh boy.
Let's talk about accessibility. So Cristina, I know that Claro is way more accessible than 7. Can you talk about some of the improvements that went into Claro, and what was the process of going through? Like how did you identify these accessibility issues? How did you get these approved? How did these get in there? And like, what are you most proud of from an accessibility point of view?
I would say probably I'm super proud about having so many people involved helping there. I basically worked at the beginning a lot with the accessibility team. Both the accessible maintainers, there are a bunch of other people that jumped in the issues and helped a lot, giving feedback and giving ideas on how to improve. For example, I'm super proud of the focus styles for Claro. I think it's a great improvement. And I think Andrew and so many people helped there. And I think the patience that the people showed there on how to improve things and how people contributed to one another, both on the design side, on the front end side, and the accessibility side, were incredible from my point of view. And I think it's great that we kind of put the accessibility part on Claro as on major thing, like a priority. And I think that's been a key for Claro. because obviously there's probably some bug that might appear, but we've had a lot of people reviewing Claro intensely, and several issues were blocking Claro becoming stable or the default theme because of accessibility. So I think that's been a big deal.
And what about Olivero, Mike?
Yeah, so a lot of what Cristina says directly applies to Olivero also. Like I talked a little bit about the Olivero menu system. I'm gonna just kind of riff off of that just a little bit, like right here. So we did a lot of work, like on the top level navigation. If there's submenus, but the top level item is a link, we use Twig to inject a button. We use JavaScript to toggle ARIA expanded states and like include like ARIA controls attributes. There's a lot of like little trickiness in there because like our menus open on hover, but they also open on click. So we like ran into an issue where if you're on an iPad, the click and hover events would fire simultaneously, and that would result in the menu opening and closing before you could even realize what would happen. So you would like have to tap it twice in order for it to open. So we have a couple things in there like a little timeout. So we tested this with like things like what's called pointer scanning tools. Like there's some tools within Mac OS, and there might be some other ones that'll kind of like scan your screen horizontally, scan your screen vertically, and allow you to zoom in and then go through that process again, and then allow you to hit a button that will trigger a click. And we tested the menu extensively with things like that. We have lots of screen reader only text in there uses the visibility hidden CSS class that will output the name of the submenu to the end user that's using that assistive technology. Like we ran into the menu kind of as you scroll down, it becomes fixed to the top of the screen. But we ran into an issue. Well, what if like your viewport height is really narrow, but the menu is really long, and then that menu sticks to the top of the screen? You can never get to those bottom items, you know. So we have like some overflow like stuff in there that fixes this. And it's pretty cool because like we have tests for like most of this stuff in here. It works really well for mobile. Like we have what's called the focus trap for like our mobile menu kind of overlays the site. And so we have what's called a focus trap, which basically means if you're tabbing around inside of that, you cannot tab outside of that until you navigate out by hitting escape or something like that. We have lots of different interactions that will like close the menu if the search menu opens, because they will overlap, and that could result in like focus visible failures, which is a success criterion for WCAG. There's so much that went into just the navigation system in general that I'm super stoked about, and I learned a heck of a lot about. But on top of that, you know, like we also have like very accessible focus states. We have logical focus orders. Like speaking of logical focus orders, you know, we actually have we have the search form injected into the page twice, once for mobile, once for desktop, because of the focus order issue. You know, so there's a lot of work that goes into accessibility. And yeah, so I'm really excited about that. And I also want to say that the name of the theme, Olivero, is named after a community member who passed away several years ago. Her name was Rachel Olivero, and she was a blind person. She was a valuable community member who worked for the National Federation of Blind, and like an accessibility advocate. And like, practically speaking, you cannot create an accessible theme, you know, and name it after a prominent accessibility advocate. That would just be like very, very wrong. So we did a heck of a lot of work. We did testing with the National Federation of Blind and a whole bunch of stuff just to make this really, really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I definitely hear you on, you know, you want to make sure that is as accessible as it possibly could be. let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something I actually don't know very much about, which is CSS. Christina, I think you actually touched on the design system, like the Drupal design system, and how Claro is using, Figma and the Drupal design system as kind of like its base for design and style, right? But I'm wondering, are there any CSS build tools that are like being used already in core? And if not, like what's the plan going forward? Because I see like if you are going to have, Claro 2.0 and 3.0 and so on and so forth, like having some sort of build tool and some sort of easy way to kind of update certain pieces of that going forward are going to be, something super important.
Okay. So basically, yeah. So it's living on Figma, the design tool, and let me see how. So, and it's not exactly related to CSS. We are going to have a lot of improvements. I really hope for Drupal 10. Otherwise, they're coming at some point later on. I would say that more involved on the CSS modernization initiative, we could say, because for at least on Claro, Olivero has been built from scratch. Claro was a clone from 7, meaning we've kind of inherited the structure that we had at 7. We built several components. We divided several things we are kind of using a lot of things, and we were still giving we were supporting Internet Explorer 11. So it means that we didn't change that many things. But what is coming, I think I'm going to let Mike talk about that, because look at his face. He's really
I'm excited.
Looking forward for that. Yeah, we're working together, but basically Mike is the one like.
All right, Mike, tell us where CSS is going in the future of Drupal.
All right. Are you ready? Are you ready, John?
I don't know.
Are you sitting down? Are you going to fall off your chair?
I am sitting on an exercise ball, so there's always a possibility of me falling off. But
well,
go ahead.
All right. I hope this is going to happen here. The first thing I want to talk about is where we currently are. We use a post-CSS toolchain in core right now called post-CSS preset env, and that allows us to basically use syntax similar to Sass. So we can do things like compile variables. We can do things like compile CSS logical properties, which I'll talk about. And we can use CSS nesting, which is like super, super useful. All the front-end developers are kind of like, yeah. And what's really neat is like all this stuff that post-CSS preset env is compiling down, eventually, years from now, that's going to hopefully make it into the CSS spec. So there's going to be a point in the future where we're going to be able to remove that this build process, and browsers will be able to natively understand that. But in the meantime, we have a tool chain very similar to Sass. But we're using like a lot. It allows us to use a lot of really, really cool things. Like, so we are like for Drupal 9, we are using CSS variables, but they're compiled down to static variables. So it's very similar to a Sass variables. And it doesn't allow us to like change the variables on breakpoints or anything like that, because we still have to support Internet Explorer 11. We're using things like CSS logical properties. Now, like before I explain what CSS logical properties are, like we have to explain what a right to left layout is, So with most Western languages like English or Spanish or Catalan, we read from the left to the right. But a right to left language like Hebrew or Arabic, you read from the right to the left, right? So at that point, we have to completely switch the layout, So like if you're looking at Olivero and a right to left layout, the system branding block is going to be on the opposite side. And so normally you would handle this by having two sets of rules. You would have one that says, margin left. And then you would have another one that says dir RTL margin right, and then the rule in there. But this allows us to write one tool that says like margin inline start. So instead of like margin left, you say margin inline start. So instead of padding left, you type in padding inline start. And there's different rules for every right and left, top and bottom thing like that. And it's really, really cool. And coming into Drupal 10, we might even be able to remove the build process from those too, which will make for smaller CSS, which is super nice. And so going into future, and this leads into the next question, we're going into Drupal 10, and that allows us to remove support for Internet Explorer.
So, Mike, I just want to let you know, in your answer, you checked all of my check boxes for what I would expect a CSS conversation to say. We talked about
fall off your chair.
I didn't fall off my chair, but like you checked the checkbox of like Sass, and you didn't mention mix-ins, but I imagine that's part of like the thing. No, nobody. That's old school. Yeah. I got it. Like I said, I don't know anything about CSS, but you got CSS variables in there. So it's interesting that this feels like it feels great. It feels like we're making progress and we're moving forward.
Drupal core CSS, like we want to get it into a good place. We want to make it maintainable. We want to get it so front-end developers could come in here and everything is componentized. They don't have to worry about like making one change here and screwing something up somewhere else, Yeah. And we want to make it so like it's easily understandable. And right now, I mean, there's CSS, like as Cristina knows, that was written in 2009 that's still in Drupal core. And that uses things like floats for positioning and stuff like that. And we're still like all that stuff needs to be refactored and changed. And we're at the point right now where with these themes kind of in core, we can focus our energy away from just creating these new themes and like, let's make this code base maintainable. Let's make it fun to work with.
And as a user, all I want to do is go into a variables file and change colors and just have it work everywhere and do the things that it's supposed to do.
And that is just a great segue into the next question.
Yeah. So what's going on in Drupal 10? You've mentioned, we're getting rid of support. We're dropping support for IE. But what are the things that are getting into Drupal 10? Are we going to start using CSS variables? Are we going to, what other changes are coming?
You want to get into this, Cristina, a little bit?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you've already said a lot of things. We're going to get rid of any dependency from IE, meaning we will be able to do so many new things that, I don't know, so many modern tools that we have on CSS already on modern browsers, and we will be able to write really cool CSS, easier CSS probably also, and shorter. But also, where it's not just Internet Explorer, we're also getting rid of UC browser. Like actually
Hopefully.
today, actually today we just had this conversation, and we just from the front-end framework team, we just decided +1 to that. So it's the two browsers we are getting rid of.
I got two questions there. One, is anybody upset about support for IE not continuing? And two, what is UC browser?
So, go ahead, Cristina.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Mike answer the IE answer. I'm just gonna answer the UC one. I think it's the Alibaba browser. Well, it's a big browser for Android, especially in China, and I think China right now has about 12% of users. I'm not sure if they are desktop or like general users. I think it's just general users because it's Android, meaning. And also, I think in India it has like a 4%, 4.5, or something like that. Meaning, their browser, it's a browser that it's used. It's just that it just got frozen. It doesn't get new updates. Meaning, it's impossible to move forward with a browser that it's not getting updates.
My understanding is that it was actually the browser was banned in India. and you might know more than me, but my understanding is because it's controlled by the Chinese government, who uses it to send like telemetry and tracking data and spy on their citizens, and for that reason, it was banned from the Indian App Store specifically for that.
Yeah, but the ones that already have that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's in, I think it's still available in China, at least for all browsers. Or I mean, there is still people using it. It's just that we need to have a balance. Yeah, we need a balance between new features and leaving some browsers behind.
Yeah. So in regards to IE, is there someone going to be upset by it? Yeah, there's always going to be someone upset, right? There's always going to be someone upset, but honestly, like at this point, Internet Explorer is not being supported by Microsoft anymore. It's not being supported really by anyone, and so we're like super happy to get rid of it. The biggest thing that I am excited about is native support for CSS variables or CSS custom properties, and I'm gonna kind of explain why this is a big deal to you, John, because I know you're a backend developer. So a better a better way to think of CSS variables is its correct name, which is called CSS custom properties. And the reason why I want people to think about that is because these are CSS properties and they cascade down through the DOM, right? So within Drupal 9, we had that build process that would basically run through all the CSS and change all the variables to their actual values. But one of the cool things is with CSS custom properties is you can change these properties based on breakpoints, right? So like you can have text that says like, you can set like, my paragraph tab or tag. I want to say text, and I'll have a variable with double dashes and I'll say color dash red. But then I can update that color dash red in like a media query, and if the browser gets larger or whatever, it will change that color dynamically. And so it's like a runtime variable. And that's extremely powerful. And we're using that in the Drupal 10 version of Olivero to change grid systems, because we're using things like CSS grid. So we changed the grids and stuff like that. But what's even more exciting than that is that like within Drupal 9, we have to make all these variables global. But instead of making the variables global, when you have proper support, you can attach variables to a certain component. So we can have like a component like within Olivero, the Drupal 10 version of Olivero's tabs, we have like we attach these custom properties to the tab block, and we can say tab block spacing is 12 pixels, tab block color is this pixels. And what that enables a themer to do, or like someone that's overriding this, is they can override these variables and change the look and feel, and they can do that on a block by block basis. Like as a front end developer, I can say I want this region's tab blocks to have, and I'm going to change the variable for the color, or the variable for the variable for the spacing, and that allows the front end developer on a component by component or a global scale to change everything, and that's super powerful.
I also want to point out one of the really cool things about it is it's one of the few things that also pierces the shadow DOM. So we, for that project that is using native web components pretty extensively, you're able to do things that just generally aren't possible with normal CSS with these. So for example, if you have a nested native web component, you can have the parent component set variables on the child component and affect it. So if you have, a good example is we have a button that goes in a component, and we would have different behavior if you're hovering over the parent or if you're hovering over the button itself, to kind of differentiate between the two. And so if you hover over the parent component, you can say, hey, set this variable. And then if you hover over the subcomponent, you can say, hey, set this variable. And it takes the variable that's closest to it in the DOM. So you can have a lot of really cool interactive. Previously, you would have to have like some sort of JavaScript that basically says, "Hey, if you're hovering over this, add this class," and then that class, changes things. But with CSS variables, you're doing all of this just natively in CSS, which means it's faster.
Yeah. And it also allows us to do things like with Drupal 10, we're allowing the user to change it to the primary color. So out of the box, Olivero will of course be Drupal blue, but you can go into your theme settings and drag around that little color picker, and I say I want to change it to pink, or I want to change it to orange or yellow or green, and you can do that. And then through the magic of CSS variables, it will just work. It just changes everything, and it doesn't use the color module, which is being deprecated, but it just gets out. It just set up. It just works. And another thing that we're doing within Drupal 10 for with CSS variables is we have a patch merge for the Drupal displace API, and I'll explain what that is if y'all don't know. So you know how at the top of, like, when you're authenticated to Drupal, you'll have the toolbars at the top, right? And the toolbars will use like a certain amount of space. And if you want to, if you're a developer and you want to say like add another toolbar, you got to figure out where to add it. How far off to do that. And the Drupal displace API does that. It allows you to, within Drupal 9, you can just you can run like a little bit of JavaScript code, and it says, hey, we're 72 pixels off the top, or we're 72 pixels off the, we're 200 pixels off the right hand side because the settings tray is open, or something like that. But so we have a we have a patch committed to Drupal 10 that whenever that gets updated, it also injects a CSS variable into, I think, the body tag or maybe the HTML tag or something. So now if you want to like position something across the top, you don't need to run JavaScript. You just need to use a CSS variable. You need to do like, say position fix, and then like top, and then the var, and then dash Drupal dash displace dash top or something, or Drupal displace right, or Drupal displace left, and it will automatically position it properly without the front end having to invoke any JavaScript. So like there's all types of things that we can use these CSS variables for. And like I personally believe that in the future web components will be coming to Drupal core. And
I can't wait.
Yeah. And then like all this stuff is going to become more important, So Cristina and I, we've been working on things like how to name the CSS variables, because we talked a little bit about backwards compatibility. If you change a variable name, well, what if someone's depending on that? We can't go breaking millions of websites. So there's been a lot of discussions on this.
Absolutely, that's super exciting. So I have a quick question for you, Cristina. I'm just curious if there are any improvements in Claro for some of the compound field elements. If you think, in Drupal 9, Drupal 8, there's certain things that you would think, hey, there's just a template for it. You take that template, like a field template or something, you can make some modifications, and they're just sometimes a little bit more difficult than other fields. The things that come to mind, for example, is like the URL field when you have the compound like link and URL combination. There's not like a template you can easily just replace to like change the label of those subcomponents. The image field, if you want to add attributes to the image field, sometimes it's a little more complex than you might think. And I'm just wondering if Claro has kind of solved that problem, or is that still something that's ongoing?
So we have several issues open to improve several fields. The problem is that if we're talking about Claro as something that is 7 just with new styles, and we want to get that as stable, what we had to do is we had to remove a lot of things from the goal to make that stable. So they are open. Like, for example, something that came on my mind, like the faster one is like the tags one. We are going to create a new component that is called chips. It's used on a lot of design systems like Material UI and that on. So instead of having just the name of the label of the tag and the ID, I mean, we are trying to get like a chip that can actually work with, like if we use I think it's chosen or these kind of things, but also improving it, that like you can have an image on there, or like several improvements. We also have several improvement to the existing fields, like input field. For example, we want to have the several sizes. We want to have like prefix, suffix, and I don't know, on top of my mind, I don't remember, like specific to fields themselves. I mean, yeah, we at some point, but it's not specific to Claro. It's more like a core thing at some point. Ideally, we should get rid of the image field and the file field and have media handling it. But that's not a Claro thing. It's a core thing. And something that is not a field related, we're working on several improvements for Claro. It's just that they're kind of on the really starting point. For example, we want at some point to replace a toolbar and come up with a better navigation solution. Just that it's not that easy, because we also have another idea to come up or to have an editor menu or a role specific menu where editors can actually have, but that needs to live at the same point as we have like a toolbar or an admin navigation menu. So nothing is that easy with Drupal, because everything needs to work with everything. And we still have more improvements in the old one, like maybe a dashboard, which is something that has been there like for ages, but we need to make that happen to have like a modern UI. And something that I'm really excited about is the change on the layout for Claro. It's probably one of the things that I have on my personal priority list, because we want to change how the form layout, for example, behaves. It's having some issues with paragraphs, and so right now the default node form it's for basic forms with I don't know, fields and so on. The moment that you start adding there, like the media region, or you start adding paragraphs, and not just paragraphs, like 3 or 4 or 5 levels of depth with paragraphs, it just increases the complexity of it. So we are going to change the layout for that.
So it doesn't sound like either of you have any shortage of work or ideas or improvements that need to be made, right, to either Olivero or Claro, right? So I guess I'm wondering if somebody's listening to this and they're like, hey, I like theming things, I want to get involved. Like, what kinds of help do you guys need? And B, how can somebody kind of insert themselves to get involved in helping either of the themes we talked about today?
So like with Olivero, we're into like Olivero is in an interesting space where like we have like a lot of the priorities done. We have like for Drupal 10, we have the color changing stuff done. We're set to be default right now. But what I'm really focusing right now is on like kind of removing some technical debt. And there's a couple like low hanging fruit in there to remove like some Internet Explorer cruft from Drupal 10, and to refactor some of these components using some of that like CSS custom properties like I talked about earlier. And we've done that for like one component. So I'm in the process of doing that for another component, but there's literally like tens of components. You know, there's probably like 20 or 30 different things that we need to get to, all of various complexity. On top of that, there's a new starter kit theme that's in core that you're going to be able to generate your own themes based on this, and I want to make that have some logical sane kind of defaults, like maybe like menus and tabs and stuff. And that's the type of thing that work could go into right now. There's also a lot of the same work that I'm talking about right here is directly, applies to Claro too. If you want to talk a little bit about that, Cristina.
Yeah, basically, we've been opening a lot of things for Claro. We will have a lot of like small issues to fix a lot of small things, and basically where people kind of came in the past to help out on 7 or any CSS thing. Right now, it's also it's a Claro thing. So either both on the Slack, for example, you can jump into the Olivero channel, or for Claro, you can jump into the admin UI one. But we kind of had like our own meeting a while ago, and now we just joined a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we combined meetings.
We are meeting together on the front end channel. So basically, because at the end, the contributors are more or less the same people. So we decided to go together, and every Wednesday, like I don't remember the hours. Every Wednesday, 3 UTC, I think it's the meeting.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the meeting together. So anybody can jump in there. There's a bunch of issues that are going to be listed, like work that needs to be done, or you can just jump into the front-end channel, or either Olivero or admin UI and ask, where can I help? Mm-hmm. And also you can go into the issue queue and you can search both for the Claro component or the Olivero theme component, or just for the tags CSS or front-end, and helping there.
Cool. You guys are like the theming Wonder Twins when your powers combine.
Kind of, but we need a few other people. Like, for example, Laurie. I don't think we will do anything without him, or Ben.
Ben Mullins.
Yeah, Ben Mullins, or lately someone that also joins is Andy Blam. But there's a lot of people that actually help.
It's like, I don't know if you ever watched Captain Planet. Like Captain Planet, it's one of those things where like, our cars come by, we all have a ring, and we shoot it up, and then we get on these mini sprints, and then we go save the world, and by the world we get stuff committed to Drupal.
That's a better superhero power analogy. Thank you both for joining us. Cristina, thank you for joining us, and Mike, thank you for joining us for the last 4 weeks. It's been great, and
I hope you didn't lose too many listeners.
They'll come back once they hear you're gone, I'm sure.
Yep.
No, it's been great having you guys. Thank you. For our listeners, if you have questions or feedback, you can reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel. If you're interested in show news, upcoming Drupal camps, local meetups, Chad's Book Corner, then you can sign up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
You too can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose Become a Patron.
Okay. Cristina, can you tell us where folks might be able to contact you if they wanted to talk about all things Claro?
Probably either Twitter or directly via the email on Drupal.org. The contact form for Drupal.org, I have that open for everybody. So, or probably Slack. Slack.
Your Drupal.org username is what?
Cikirina.
There we go. Mike Herschel, if people wanted to contact or avoid you, how could they go about doing that?
So my username on Drupal.org is also CKRina. And
no way.
So I'm on Twitter at Mike Herschel, with Herschel has a C but no S in it. And I'm on Drupal.org at mherschel. And you can email me at mike@herschel.com. I'm going to launch my website soon. I'm going to start blogging and stuff like that. So that's herschel.com, HERCHEL.com. I actually have a website right now, but it's like an old Gatsby site. But I'm going to move it to Drupal, and I'm going to use the Olivero theme because it looks good. And I'm using Claro as a back-end theme.
I think Ryan just did that. I saw his blog. He's using Olivero on his front end as well.
I'm using a statically generated Olivero theme for my site.
It's funny how people will use the default theme when it looks good.
It's funny. We're going to get back to the stigma of everybody saying like all the Drupal sites look the same.
But it looks good, so that's okay.
That's fine.
You will be able to change the color from now on.
There you go. Get those CSS variables going. Nick, where can people find you?
You can find me online pretty much everywhere at NixVan, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Have a good one, everyone.